Hello, welcome to Fans of Fandom. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Wesselman, psychologist, professor, and full-time nerd. On this show, I have deep dive conversations with cool people about things that we're fans of. If you're joining us, chances are you're a fan too. Welcome aboard. This series is called Inside the Cosplay. I'm a fan of cosplay, specifically cosplayers. For some, it's a hobby. Then there are those for whom it's a profession. And for others, it's a way of life. Now, regardless of their motivation, I love watching cosplayers do their thing. Their passion, their dedication, their creativity. They're wearing their fandom. So in this series, I'm going to feature some of the cool cosplay folks I've worked with in the con world. Let's get started. Today, I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Justine Mastin, author, panel moderator, mental health consultant, podcaster, and of course, cosplayer. I've worked with Justine on various live and virtual convention panels, and we both have contributed to the popular culture psychology book series. Justine, I'm thrilled to have you join me today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's good to hang out.
Indeed. So let's just jump right in. Why don't you
Mhm.
tell me your cosplay origin story?
Yeah, so I got into cosplay when I got into the TV show Supernatural, which was not I was not an early adopter on Supernatural. I would see ads for it, and because Jared Padalecki had been on Gilmore Girls and his name was Dean on Gilmore Girls, and then I found out that he was a character who had a brother named Dean on Supernatural, I was like, I'm not watching it for that reason, which eventually I got over it. But Supernatural was the first show that I watched and felt like I want to enact those people.
Mm,
I had tiptoed into cosplay before that. I didn't know that's what I was doing.
mhm.
When I watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I just really wanted to wear her pleather pants, and so I wore her pleather pants. Um, but this was the first time that I was like, you know, that outfit that Dean Winchester wears, I want to wear that and I want to feel like Dean in those clothes.
Yeah, so let's unpack that you use the term very specifically, enact those people. So tell me a
Hmm.
little bit more about what you mean by that.
Yeah, what I mean is, I when I think of cosplay, I think of it as, and we'll talk about fan fiction a little bit later.
Mhm.
Um, but fan fiction is kind of my niche, and specifically real life fan fiction.
Mhm.
So rewriting your life to be the way you want it to be.
Mhm.
And if I want to feel like Dean Winchester for a minute,
Mhm.
well, I need to set the scene. And part
Mhm.
of how you set the scene to feel like Dean is to get some flannel
Mhm.
and some boots. And when I started doing that Dean cosplay, and I had a little cosplayer name for my Dean,
Mhm.
which was Just Dean Winning Chester. um, which I was very proud of. But I also had a bunch of friends who were really into Supernatural at that time too, who would cosplay. We actually went out into the woods once. I live in Minneapolis, and we're very close to green spaces. We went out in the woods and did a whole photo shoot
Ah, okay. Yeah.
where we really, like, not only did we have the outfits on, but we were portraying the characters.
Mhm.
And I had my one man tear coming down my face. um and I got to feel like, yeah, I am this character, I am in the show. Well,
So,
I brought the show into real life.
so it's not just wearing the outfit, it's perspective taking, it's embodying, it's
Yeah,
full action, right?
when I think of cosplay, that's what I think of.
Mhm.
um and there's so many ways to do it, of course, but
Mhm.
for me, I'm a therapist.
Mhm.
And part of the therapeutic benefit of cosplay, from my perspective, is that we get to step into someone else's shoes, literally,
Mhm,
um, and be them
mhm.
in a safe way and see what that feels like. And we can keep the parts that work for us and leave the rest. Maybe we can carry some of Dean Winchester back with us into our real lives, even when we're not in the flannel.
Well, since we sort of moved in that direction, why don't we talk a little bit more about the way that you see fanfic, cosplay, and therapy sort of reaching some type of synergy, right?
Hmm.
So I like this idea of taking something that you like and
Hmm.
leaving something that you don't. So why don't we start there?
Yeah. I, I see fanfic every time I see cosplay, and I know not everybody makes that connection, but we're literally pulling characters out of the screen or the book or whatever, placing them on us and bringing them out into the real world, which to me, that's fanfic.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing that every time we put on a fan t-shirt too,
Hmm.
right? We're like, oh, well, I'm gonna have this character with me. Today I'm wearing Hello Kitty, and this is Hello Kitty cosplaying as all the members of the band Kiss.
Hmm.
So Hello Kitty is fanficking
Hmm.
that she is all the members of the band Kiss.
Hmm.
And now I am wearing them,
Hmm.
and I get to feel like Hello Kitty, Kiss, Hello Kissy. Like I get to be any or all of those, or
Hmm.
have them with me
Hmm.
to feel supported by, inspired by, what
Hmm.
have you. And I I mean, I love fandom apparel
Hmm.
because it's a shortcut to understanding with other fans.
Hmm.
Because if when I wear this shirt, not everybody gets it, right?
Hmm.
But people who do are like, "Oh, do you like Hello Kitty? Do you like Kiss? Do you like Hello Kitty as Kiss?" I'm like, we both like that. That's so
Hmm.
great.
Yeah, it's like an immediate icebreaker, right? You just
Yeah.
have an inroad to connect with that person, and maybe that's all you'll end up sharing with them.
Hmm.
Maybe you'll find out you got more in common.
For real. And, again, as a therapist, I've built my practice on folks who have felt a connection to story,
Hmm.
and many of them feel inspired by characters and want to wear or have on their person
Hmm.
aspects of these characters. And we're still not great as an industry at not pathologizing that.
So when you're saying that there, you're talking about mental health
Yes,
industry.
I'm talking about mental health. I know you are not
Mhm.
a clinician.
Right? Yeah.
Yes, us.
I see.
Uh,
Okay. Gotcha. Well, I wasn't talking about me there. I
no.
wasn't sure when you were saying industry
Mhm.
if you were talking popular culture industry, but
Sure,
now
sure,
I
sure, sure.
track. Yeah.
No, as a therapy industry,
Mhm.
there's still a lot of stigma around like stuff like LARPing.
Hmm.
Okay, so you want to put on these outfits and you want to pretend that you're having a battle and you're actually going to fight, and is this pathological? Like, it's play. we
Where do you think some of those hurdles might be? Is it just adults playing generally, or is it the type of play, or both?
I think it's both. We're still, and this we is society.
Mm,
Society is still not great with the idea of the importance of adult play,
mm, mhm.
which that is one of my pet peeves in this world, is the idea that it is not okay for adults to play because why? Like, do we hit some developmental stage where play is no longer needed? No, we don't. Show me the Piaget research that says we put play away. Um, but also nerdiness, geekery, whatever you want to call it, pop culture, aficionados are
Mhm.
much more in the mainstream than we once were.
Mhm.
So in that aspect, it's better, but stuff like LARPing is still pretty misunderstood.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, if someone went into a traditional talk therapist and was talking about being a part of Vampire the Masquerade,
Mhm.
there's going to be a lot of misunderstanding in that conversation, right? Especially if that person is talking about a problem they're having in game.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, think of the therapist being like, well, what's real and what's not real? And the person's like, it's all real. These are real relational issues I'm having. It just so happens that I am Lady Fluff and stuff who's having an issue with Baron von something something. I'm clearly not
Baron
in that.
von Soul crushing angst.
Yeah, exactly. I have a dear friend who's in Vampire the Masquerade. I'm sure if she watches this, she'll be cringing. But
Well, I've never LARPed Vampire the Masquerade, but I played a lot of White Wolf in college and still gravitate more towards those types of stories. And I'm not cringing, so
yeah, okay,
got
great.
one who's with you.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's so much there to unpack because although I never really caught the acting bug per se, um, I feel like the people I know who sort of get that understand that it's all acting.
Hmm.
And I suppose at some level, um, I've had with other guests, I've talked about how to some degree we could look at life as cosplay, as performance, as
Hmm.
acting. I mean, if I decide to put on, dress clothes before I give it a conference presentation, I'm performing some aspect of myself. And
Hmm.
some aspects that are not myself, but something that I want to portray. Um, uh,
Yeah. I mean, from that perspective, I did a lot of cosplay long before Supernatural.
mhm.
I cosplayed a waitress.
Yeah.
Uh and then I cosplayed like little executive in the late 90s. I
Mm,
The cosplay I wore was polyester suits with the wide shoulders because I was like, I'm a professional woman in the working world. Um that didn't feel real, but
mhm,
somehow putting on the polyester, I was like, look at me.
mhm.
I am playing a role. I am working girl.
Right, and some of that was to perhaps fit others' expectations. Maybe some of that might have been at that particular time with your own
Mhm.
identity formation. Maybe you thought you wanted some aspect of that. Is that a fair?
Sure, 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 sure. Yeah, I mean, it's the societal narrative is you should want to climb the corporate ladder. And if you're getting these business opportunities when you're young, you should take them. And like this is what professional women in the working world were wearing. And
Mhm,
so, yeah, I want to also be wearing that so that I can fit in and maybe let the clothes rub off on me,
mhm,
and
mhm.
maybe I will believe that I am that person. You know, like when I was a waitress and I would put on the white shirt and the bow tie and the name tag, which I still have dreams that I can't find my bow tie. Um, I'm like, I am getting into the headspace. I'm getting into character,
Yeah. Mhm,
and I am getting ready to pour coffee and take people's plates. And it's this is an interesting conversation. I love these kinds of conversations because I always wind up with some new perspectives. Um, yeah, I was definitely cosplaying at that time, and there were parts that I dug, and
mhm.
there were parts that I did not dig.
Right. Yeah. There's, coming back to the point you made earlier about, taking aspects of a character that you like and
Mm-hmm.
creating that, and perhaps
Yep.
other characters are complex, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
things about Dean that are very, um, valuable, if you will,
Mhm.
psychologically healthy, and there are other spots that are not, right?
Right. Yeah.
And-
I don't want to be in constant conflict with my sibling.
right.
I also don't want to be drinking so much alcohol all the time.
Right. Right. As a way of coping with the constant trauma that
Right. Right.
and in life there our identities are complex, and we have aspects of ourselves that are laudable, and there's other areas that we perhaps need to work on.
Hmm.
um, I want to actually pivot there a little bit too, because we've talked about this, I think, in other contexts, and I know you have been on other panels, but this idea of taking things that you like, that you want to connect to yourself, and leaving things
Hmm.
that you don't. um, when we connect with characters, ones that we want to cosplay,
Hmm.
sometimes we find out about things about people who created those characters or who portrayed those characters that
Yeah.
don't sit so well with our
Hmm.
values, right?
Hmm.
How do you see that, not just sort of generally, as
Hmm.
someone who uses fandom in therapy?
Hmm. Yeah. This is such a hard question, and it's been very present, especially since, J.K. Rowling came out with a lot of anti-trans rhetoric.
Mhm,
Um, and, I mentioned I'm a Buffy fan, found out Joss Whedon is not the guy we thought he was,
mhm,
which that one was really painful for me.
mhm,
Um, I was attached to Harry Potter for sure, but
mhm,
I wasn't attached to J.K. Rowling in any way.
mhm,
Like I didn't feel like I had any kind of fandom attachment to her. I was like, no, I'm attached to these characters.
mhm,
Um, but with the Whedon verse,
mhm,
I was connected not just to the characters, but to the creator. And
mhm,
so to find out that the creator was not just not a great guy, because I mean, let's be real, there's lots of not great guys in the creative world,
mhm,
but that he had seemed so great, that he had been cosplaying
mhm,
of you know this this feminist,
mhm,
and so that was really painful. And I have these conversations a lot where folks are like, well, am I allowed to still like this?
mhm.
The short answer is, I'm not the boss of you.
Right. Mhm,
This is your relationship with.
mhm,
This
mhm,
is your relationship with the story. This is your relationship with these characters. It's your relationship with the creator.
mhm,
And only you can decide what feels right for you.
mhm.
My invitation to folks is, when we find out people are actively harming folks, like, let's not give them money
Right.
or a platform.
Mhm,
But if cosplaying a character from Harry Potter is meaningful to you,
mhm,
I don't get to tell you not to do that.
mhm,
And Buffy is still a meaningful story to me.
mhm.
I've I discovered it right when it came out, which was, I guess, 1997. I would have just finished high school. Um, I mean, that story at that time in my life,
Mhm,
I Joss Whedon, yes, he had a big hand in that,
mhm,
but he didn't come into my living room and help me connect to Buffy. I Buffy and I had that connection,
mhm,
and
mhm,
he doesn't get to mess that up for me.
mhm,
So, but bottom line,
mhm,
I believe that when stories come out
mhm,
of the collective unconscious,
mhm,
that they belong to all of us and
mhm.
no longer to their creator, which I know that a certain mouse would disagree with. Um, but that's my opinion, and it's okay if, folks at home watching this have different opinions. That's okay. It's all our own experience and what feels meaningful to us.
Yes. So what I'm hearing is that, sort of, just as identity is a process, just generally, right?
Mhm.
So is how we write the fanfic of our fandoms, right?
Yeah.
And it's their
Mhm.
relations to our identities, and we we can change it just as we learn more information about real people that we have relationships with, and those relationships change.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We, as our friend Scott Jordan says, love people at different distances.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Reconnect with that friend from high school on social media, and then you
Mm-hmm.
realize, wow, we are very different people than uh,
Mm-hmm.
than maybe the connections we had back then.
Mm-hmm.
You just rewrite the way we currently think of them. We don't
Right.
necessarily rewrite the memories, and
Mm-hmm.
this is where I've struggled and had debates with people
Mm-hmm.
about is a song, a movie, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I have nostalgia. I have a time in my life with that,
Mm-hmm.
and so I may not give those artists money now,
Mm-hmm.
but when I hear those songs, for me, I've been able to figure out a way to rewrite my memory, if you will, to
Yeah.
rewrite my parasocial connection,
Mm-hmm.
to accommodate that dissonance. And for people who can't, I'm not going to judge them for that because, as you mentioned, use the term painful, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's true. It is cognitive dissonance. It is emotional pain, uh, and we all got to get through that in the best way we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
that's right. And I my niche in the therapy world, aside from pop culture, is I'm a marriage and family therapist.
mhm,
And it's kind of a misnomer.
mhm,
People are like, "Oh, you work with couples and families." Like I do, I can, but
mhm,
really what it means is I see the world in terms of systems and relationships.
mhm,
And yeah, our relationships change over time.
mhm,
Um, but there's typically some like positive memories, even if there was a terrible experience
mhm,
with a family member. And
mhm.
I talk to people about this a lot. They're like, "Oh, my my dad was such a jerk." And I get mad at myself for smiling when I remember that we had these pizza parties. Like, it sounds like the pizza parties were really meaningful to you.
Mhm.
Can two things be true at once? Can it be both and rather than either or?
Yes, no, I love that both and because certainly in Western individualistic societies,
Mm-hmm.
right, and in the uh, WASP US, the WASP US,
Yep.
right,
Uh-huh.
which is almost hyper individualistic,
Mm-hmm.
right? There is such this emphasis on individualism um, and almost like dualism, right? A
Mm-hmm.
dichotomy. Like, you say the question, who are you? Well, I'm lots of people in lots of contexts, right? And in more
Mm-hmm.
collectivistic societies, that seems to be less of an issue, right? I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
concept of self complexity is a lot more intuitive in those cultural systems than they are in the ones that dominate
Mm-hmm.
U.S. society. Um, so I think, yeah, being able to sit in that complexity is something that those of us who have grown up in that need to work harder, perhaps, at if we want to be able to integrate this sort of both and perspective. Um, I this sort of just occurred to me as we were sort of talking in the fanfic headspace.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think of some of the early work on fanfic and
Mm-hmm.
how so much of at least what I read talks about the fanfic started largely as a way of either continuing the parasocial relationship
Mm-hmm.
after a season because it was
Yep.
mostly TV,
Mm-hmm.
right after the shows ended,
Mm-hmm.
or if one didn't like where the show went,
Mm-hmm.
telling different stories. Like some of the Beauty and the Beast stuff didn't like it when Linda Hamilton's character was killed off, right? And so people told
Wow, that's a real that was a
right. Mhm,
the I know that stuff's in the literature,
mhm,
but it always strikes me as like, wow, that that's so far from what I'm typically thinking about on a daily basis, right? Like the stuff about Star Trek, I'm like, oh yeah, that still resonates. But
mhm.
then there's the stuff about Beauty and the Beast. I'm like, whoa, hang on, I need to acclimate myself. We're talking about the Linda Hamilton.
Yes, yes, we're talking about the Linda Hamilton, Ron Perlman, right? Around the same time where the internets were starting to go with the listservs, right? I know
Mhm.
Twin Peaks, right, was also
Uh,
and
yeah, that's one
that
of that was my That was my first fandom. Like
Mhm.
that my what I would consider to be fandom was Twin Peaks. I was much too young to be watching it, but
I think I'm still too young to be watching it sometimes. Some days I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Other days I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah, well, that's
Don't even
David
get me
Lynch for
started on
you.
Fire Walk with Me.
Oh,
So,
yeah. I didn't like that as much, but
well, and then I think part of that for me was
hmm
it didn't have the humor, right? And we
yeah.
also knew where, as a prequel, we knew where it was ending, right?
hmm
So, um,
Yes, but I'm sorry, I got us off on a tangent. You were going somewhere with Linda Hamilton.
well, that's right. Well, I mean, but so in your head canon, you
hmm
know, did you go somewhere else with Dale Cooper, right? After the show that proper ended.
Yes, yes. Thank you for this question.
Mhm, yes.
Um, so I have dear friends who loved the Twin Peaks season 3, when it came back after 25 years.
Mhm,
I did not love it.
mhm, mhm,
Because that was not my coop.
mhm,
I that that is not how I wanted Dale Cooper to show up in the world. I
mhm,
did not I It didn't have the vibe anymore that I had resonated with.
mhm, mhm,
And I so to me,
mhm,
in my fanfic, there was no season 3.
mhm, mhm. That was a multiverse. That was
Yeah.
Twin Peaks 001 or oh
Yep.
02.
Well, and here's the thing. If for my friends for whom it was meaningful, I'm like, I'm so glad that you got to have the uh I can't even think of the name they gave Cooper in the anyway, because he had a different name and he had different characters. It was a whole thing. Jane E was his Doug. Doug? Whatever. That's not important. Um, what is important is that yes, I felt totally blindsided when they ended the show after season 2 on a cliffhanger.
Mhm,
And over the years, I didn't like necessarily write anything down,
mhm,
but in my mind, I was like, okay, so the story ends here. And I can continue it in my mind if I want to. I can always go back to the beginning.
mhm,
A show
mhm.
can exist on a loop,
There you go.
you know? He looks in the mirror, blood running down his face, and then he's driving right back into Twin Peaks.
Right, which would be a very David Lynch uh, type thing.
Right?
He woke up. It was a nightmare. Or
Yeah,
was it?
right. And that was okay, but when I was so excited when it was coming back after 25 years because I was like, I'm gonna get my buddies back. I'm gonna find out what happened to my buddies.
Yeah.
I didn't like what they did to my buddies.
Mhm,
And so to me, I was like, no, thank you. That's something I'm gonna leave. That's a leave the rest for me.
mm, mhm. Now, have you considered fa- uh cosplaying the way that your Dale Cooper or
You know,
not Dale,
I've
Dale is first name?
yeah, you were
Yes.
right. It's Dale. No, I've never thought about doing a Coop cosplay. I mean, that's a very Castiel vibe.
Yes.
But I never cosplayed Cass either.
I don't understand the reference. Like what I did there?
Yeah, I do like what you did there.
I I I really, yeah. I mean, we could probably, we'll have to sort of curtail the tangent a little bit because we could easily go on more about Twin
Oh,
Peaks.
I mean,
But I
please.
I, I
Yeah.
definitely resonated with that idea of just this sort of enjoyment of the cup of coffee, giving oneself a gift. Those type of lines stuck with me, and it's
Mm-hmm.
a character who was so much in the trauma, you know,
Mm-hmm.
somehow seemed to be grounded in that.
Yeah, and had a spiritual life,
Yep. Hmm.
which you that's just not something I had seen on screen before, where someone kind of believed in mystical things,
Hmm.
but wasn't witchy in any way. He
Hmm.
was, seemed like a real laced up dude, and
Hmm.
he believed in this kind of mythical
Hmm.
dipping down into the extraordinary, if we're thinking of hero's journey.
He was complex yet coherent in himself.
Hmm.
Like he was comfortable in his complexity.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah. And um, yeah, I've said this before. Um, Something that was really meaningful to me about Coop was when asked where are we going, he said he didn't know, but he was sure it would be somewhere both wonderful and strange.
Mm,
And for a young person who did not yet understand my own weirdness and queerness, um, that that just really stuck with me, that someone can be wonderful and strange. That
mm.
strange can be wonderful, wonderful can be strange. And I was like, yes, thank you.
Is this mixture of like of optimism, of approach, of
Hmm.
growth mindset, right? That's
Hmm.
especially at a time that this is your late teens, right? You were about to go into college. Was that or
That was with Buffy.
okay? That was
Um,
okay.
with Twin Peaks, that would have been 89, so I would have been
Okay,
like 10ish.
gotcha. So still in that sort of moving into adolescence and emerging adulthood time
Hmm.
frame when there is a
Yep.
lot of pressure because probably about that time there was emphasis on well, what are you going to be when you grow up,
Ugh,
right? As if like
yes.
there's one way to be, there's like an
Hmm.
ending point. I mean, I still am amazed that the track that I started on at 18
Hmm.
more or less ended up where I went in various
Wow.
ways because
Yeah.
I feel like that's really uncommon. Like honestly still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I mean, I have a sense, but I've shifted more to being as I learn more about the psychology of identity and the psychology of
Hmm.
identity development and and complexity and emergence,
Hmm.
I've maybe started to move a little less of that hyper individualism, that is the milieu that I grew up in,
Yeah.
moving more into other ways of thinking and being.
Hmm.
So, still, I'm not quite ready to jump into cosplay. Tried it and haven't caught the bug, but
No,
it's one
that's
of the
it.
reasons why I'm doing this
Okay.
podcast is because I am interested in it as a fan of fandom.
Hmm.
I want to know why people love what they do and how they
Hmm.
experience it.
Yeah,
So
that's so meta. You're a
yeah,
fan of fandom.
yep. Well, let's move away from the meta a little bit and talk
Hmm.
more about cosplay specifically again. So you've
Yeah.
mentioned like your Justine um,
Hmm.
as your origin. What
Uh-huh.
are a couple other cosplays that are really meaningful to you?
Yeah, so I had a number of Dean cosplays. So just naming that, it wasn't just one. I
Okay.
had, I had Dean's typical look, which was, a flannel and then the leather jacket and the boots and everything. Um, then I also had a summertime version of that I would wear cutoff shorts. And I have the outfit from After School Special where he's the gym teacher. I was particularly proud of that one. I have a great photo of me with Jensen Ackles, and I'm wearing that outfit.
Mhm.
I asked him to hold my dodgeball, and he did. Uh, I'll share that photo with you.
Excellent.
Um, so of course, very proud of those. I also played dodgeball with the Witch King of Agmar at a convention. So I'll send you some of these. Um, Also during the same time that I started getting into Supernatural, BBC Sherlock was on,
Mm-hmm.
and I did some Watson, my version of Watson. So a little bit of fanficking,
Hmm.
right? What would Watson look like if Watson was a lady, um, and it was summertime and we were going to conventions?
Hmm.
Uh, I don't necessarily want to have the whole thing.
Hmm.
Um, Jack Harkness from Doctor Who.
Okay.
Again, all of these and then here's why I feel like cosplay and fanfic are so inextricably linked
Hmm.
because I would think to myself, okay, what's screen accurate? And then I would think, what do I want?
Mm, mhm,
Right? So what feels important to me to keep?
mhm,
And then what do I want to play with?
mhm,
How do I make how do I bring Jack Harkness into my life
mhm,
in the way that works for me? So it's obvious to other people that's who I'm cosplaying, but also it's my Jack Harkness.
mhm, mhm,
So I don't know if you're familiar with Captain Jack. He's got he's got a long blue coat. He's got suspenders. Um, and so I wanted to be sure to have the long blue coat, the suspenders. But then I was like, we're doing shorts because it's summertime,
mm, mhm,
and the blue button down because that'll be a
mhm.
signal too. Um, but otherwise, I'm not stressed about being screen accurate. I know some folks that's really meaningful to them, and no shade,
Mhm.
you do you. For me, I just want to have fun. I want to play.
So that the cosplaying really is, it seems to be, although it's still always, there's one probably does some amount of theory of mind. Like you said, you wanted a
Hmm.
clue, right? Because you
Yeah.
didn't necessarily need that. You could have walked around a con the entire time and only you knew who you were.
Hmm.
There
For
was a
sure.
little bit, but it seems to be largely what I'm hearing is you are doing it for you.
Hmm.
And then whatever.
Yeah. Well, I'm doing it for me, and I do want to engage with other humans. I want to have that shortcut to understanding where
Mhm,
they see me and go, Lady Captain Jack.
mhm,
And I did have a delightful interaction at that convention with someone who was playing Captain John,
mm,
who's the James Marsters character from Torchwood. And we just had a lovely little banter back and forth and took a
mhm,
picture. And that was delightful. That's all I wanted.
mhm. Well,
I
that's,
Yeah, go
see,
ahead.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, you're fine.
What I'm hearing,
I was just gonna keep saying it was delightful.
well, so what I'm hearing like is there's this moment, right? It's delightful, it's play, and to go
Hmm.
back to a thought I had when you were talking earlier about, or when we were discussing
Hmm.
hangups that people seem to have about adult play, is
Hmm.
that it doesn't, at the risk of sounding anti-capitalist, it doesn't
This
have
is a safe space as far as I'm
right,
concerned for
right,
anti-capitalist rhetoric.
yeah, but it doesn't have any monetary objective value. It
Mm,
doesn't do anything tangible, but it doesn't have to. It
hmm.
doesn't need to. Like, so I will sometimes talk to people about fandom, and I say this as a fan, that
Hmm.
it's trivial. And of course, that word is
Mm,
kind of loaded. And I
mm,
don't mean it that way. I mean,
yeah.
like, it doesn't have to have anything more than you enjoying life, right?
Hmm.
So I can memorize the lineage of Aragorn, or memorize the names of the blades. I can't remember the name of the one that was killed the Witch King, and I
Hmm.
like name the dodgeball that in the picture, right? um, but it doesn't have any more or less intrinsic value than memorizing sports statistics, right? There's a social value that
Yes.
society places on that. They would say
Hmm.
one is quote unquote better than the other, but F that, right?
Hmm.
At the end of the day, all it is something that we engage in to help us love life a little bit more and find personal meaning.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I feel like that in of itself is healthy and should be
Yeah. Well,
celebrated.
it's to my mind that is spirituality.
Mm, mhm,
Spirituality is that which fills us up.
mm, mhm,
And if part of what fills you up is play,
mhm,
that's beautiful.
mhm,
I wish it had more respect, and I get up on my soapbox about this a lot. Um, I've been a yoga teacher
mhm,
since 2010.
mhm,
I no longer really teach because I'm much more focused on this part of my work,
mhm,
but I used to be very focused on my yoga teaching, and part of what I did was I created a narrative style of yoga that I called Yoga Quest,
mhm, mhm,
where I would tell a story. Basically, I would do fanfic of some story and I would add yoga into it.
mhm,
And people would come and cosplay to that. So
mhm.
they're coming to move their bodies,
Hmm.
and so they're embodying.
Right.
And they get to embody each character, even if it's not the character who they're cosplaying.
Hmm.
But maybe they want to give every pose that vibe. So let's say we were doing a Star Trek quest.
Hmm.
Maybe you're dressed as Captain Kirk. Maybe you give every pose a swagger. Even when you're doing this, you got a little bit of swagger. It was just fun. It was just play. And like, yes, I was a yoga teacher. I was part of the capitalist system. I was trying to make some money. I trust me, I never did well. But just trying to keep the lights on.
Hmm.
Um, but the purpose was play. I wanted to invite people and give them a permission
Hmm.
to come in, embody characters however you like, or
Hmm.
not at all,
Hmm.
but engage with story and allow it to be embodied.
Excellent. Embodied story. I like
Hmm.
that phrase. So I often think of cosplay as embodied fandom, but there's another angle here too.
Hmm.
It's embodied story because it's not just a connection to the character. It's as the way you're
Hmm.
describing it, it's being, it's acting, right?
Yeah, well, and I would say being more than acting, because
Mm,
there are ways to act where we are separate and we're just performing.
I see. Hmm. So like before, well, yeah, okay. So going back to the point we made earlier about, you know, like when you were cosplaying a waitress, right?
Yes.
There were
Hmm.
some aspects that were you, that was part of your,
Hmm.
I hate the word true self, but I know that's a concept that's
Yeah.
been in literature.
Hmm.
Right? Um, Not necessarily an ideal self, but perhaps an ought self in that concept, in that
Hmm.
context, right? You're like, as a food service worker, right?
Hmm.
I need to present a veneer that I actually give a crap about every person in here, the same level at the same
Hmm.
moment,
Yep.
right? And I'm always the same pleasantness.
Hmm.
Even when the person's a jerk, you got to pretend like you like them if you want the tip,
That's
right?
right. Yep.
So,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah. And so there were moments when I embodied
mhm.
being a waitress, and there were moments when I was definitely putting on a mask and just acting. It's like,
Mhm,
I am so sorry that
mhm,
you got the chicken instead of the fish.
mhm. Right. I
Allow me to
often
remedy that for you.
cool. Let's pivot to what are maybe some cosplay projects that you'd like to revisit that maybe didn't go as well as you would have liked, that you learned some lessons from.
So, when you spoilers for people at home, I did get these questions ahead of time. Um, but when you sent me these questions, I was thinking to myself, I don't have something like that,
Mm-hmm.
because to me, each thing that I've done is kind of its own.
Hmm.
It was its own moment. It was its own experience.
Hmm.
And so, was it objectively good? That so depends on things. And like I said, I'm not down with
Hmm.
everything has to be screen accurate.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes I'll get an idea that I'll want to run with. Um, like when I cosplay Robin from Stranger Things and I do her Scoops Ahoy outfit, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna get it from Spirit Halloween.
Hmm.
I'm not a seamstress. They make a Scoops Ahoy outfit. I'm gonna do that. But you know what I'm gonna do to make it special? I am gonna order a child's toy set of ice cream cones so that I can have my little scoop and
Hmm.
my little ice creams with me.
Nice.
Um, and I feel like that was delightful. I don't feel like I need to do more, do different than that. And I did a Thor Love and Thunder with
Mm.
the leather vest. And I had a Stormbreaker with me. If I
Hmm.
could do anything, it would be not bring Stormbreaker with me. It was a pain in the butt. Uh, but it was just silly. It was fun.
Mhm,
I don't know what I'm gonna cosplay next.
mhm,
I mean, the next thing coming up is San Diego Comic-Con as we're recording this.
mhm.
Um, I'm doing a panel on Our Flag Means Death, so I'll do a pirate outfit. But otherwise, I don't know what's next in the hopper. Ooh, now that we're talking about, maybe I will get out my Dean Winchester after school special outfit. I haven't brought that out in a long time. That'd be a
Excellent.
fun one.
Revisit the old hits, right?
Yeah, revisit an old favorite. And I don't know that there's anything I would add to it, but maybe when I pull it out, I'll realize I need a new sweatband or something.
You'll see how inspiration may strike,
That's
right?
right. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll cut those shorts shorter.
Well, I really appreciate your candor reflection on this question because as I hang out with my friends who cosplay in various ways, some for
Hmm.
fun, some professionally.
Hmm.
Um, I listen to a lot of their conversations about how new people getting into cosplay, there's a lot of expectations of what it quote unquote is or what they
Hmm.
think it is.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of pressure, imposter syndrome. And what I and there's concern among the community about like, to what degree is that, especially now that lots of people seem to be curating their images and trying to be
Hmm.
quote unquote cos famous, that putting undue pressure? Is that leading to burnout? Is that leading to mental health problems?
Hmm.
Is that stifling joy and creativity, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of there is no one way to cosplay, and knowing what you want, right? If
Hmm.
one wants to be that screen accurate, if they want to be that cos famous, then
Hmm.
knowing in advance, informed consent, this is the path, this is the way
Hmm. This is
that
the
you have to
way.
be. You can't take that mask off at all, even when you eat. um,
Hmm.
or saying, you know what, maybe I want to be this other cosplay, or maybe I want to do multiples and just see where the mood takes me
Hmm.
at one time.
Yeah. And if you suddenly have more money and you want to, I don't know, upgrade something that you had done in the past, I get that. I have done a lot of very low budget cosplay. I
Mm,
mean, which to me is fine.
mhm,
I'm not I'm not entering any contests. I have clients who are very serious cosplayers, and we do have conversations about, like, hey, there's a con coming up. How is your prep going? Are you taking care of yourself? Or are you only sewing all day, every day? Um, that's not my experience because
mhm,
you know, I'm I'm never gonna enter a cosplay contest. Um, but I think it helps that I have the awareness to check in with them,
mhm,
because I think not all therapists would get it.
mhm,
And as any time I get a platform, I'm going to invite you, if you are a therapist at home, to pay attention to what your clients are into as far as fandom, and be aware, like, if there's a con coming up, check in on them. Have they plotted enough time, or are they doing nothing but sew and glue things and they haven't eaten in 3 days?
mm. So let's probe that a little bit deeper. So since you've had clients who do cosplay, what are some of the challenges that you've seen in those, that these individuals have faced, and how would you sort of, what advice would you give in terms of the cosplay community generally, new, middle, old,
Hmm.
um, to negotiate that as a therapist?
Yeah, so there's a few things. One I kind of already hinted about, which is this hyper focus, of the, the con is coming. I didn't put in as much time ahead of time as I had thought that I would, and now we're down to crunch time, and I'm giving myself carpal tunnel because I'm gluing fiddly little bits onto fiddly little bits. Um, I want to check in with those folks, see how they're taking care of themselves. And then there's a part B to that, which is when I want to have a conversation about what is good enough, right?
Mhm.
Because this is a situation where perfectionism can be the enemy of
Everything.
right? Because these are folks who are, they're in it to win it, literally. Um, and if this is a new piece, they want it to be perfect. They want its first appearance to, win grand prizes or whatever. And my question is always, what's this worth? Is this worth our emotional, physical, and mental well-being?
Mhm.
Um, could it be okay if it's just done
Mhm.
and not done perfectly?
Mhm.
Well, but then I won't win, blah, blah, blah. How come you wanted to cosplay in the first place?
Mhm.
How come you wanted to make a cosplay of this character? Is it because you thought it would look cool and you want to win a prize? I'm guessing that's not the main reason.
Mhm.
I'm guessing the main reason is you feel connected to this character, this story,
Mhm.
and you want to embody it, back to embodiment.
Mhm.
Can you still embody this character even if not every little fiddly bit gets glued onto the thing with the thing?
Mhm.
And yeah, maybe you won't get the grand prize. You still get to be the character. You've still put in a ton of work. Can you be proud of yourself for what you did
Mhm.
rather than focusing on what didn't get done? Or I see this a lot, shaming yourself for not starting sooner,
Mhm.
right? Oh, the con's in a month. I said I would start 6 months early this year.
Mhm.
Let's talk about what we were discussing 6 months ago.
Mhm.
Were
Mhm.
you in a headspace to be sitting in a room gluing things? Or were you dealing with some other stuff? Oh, I guess I was dealing with some other stuff. Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a reason you didn't start 6 months ago.
Mhm.
And can we have compassion for past us
Mhm.
who was doing the very best they could
Mhm.
and have compassion for current us who can only do so much in a month,
Mhm.
right? So the I could keep talking forever, but the key bits here are, can we
Mhm.
find compassion for ourselves?
Mhm.
Can we remember why we got into this in the first place, that this was meant to be joy and play?
Mhm.
And can we recapture that
Mhm.
and find some forgiveness if we don't win the prize? That doesn't mean we're bad. We did something bad.
Mhm.
It's just information.
Mhm.
Okay. So,
And knowing through that process, if they discover that actually no, they really do want to win,
mm-hmm,
right? Then how are they going to the next time
mm-hmm,
change things up a little bit to provide a bit more time, right?
right.
So because
Mm-hmm,
again, you know, there are multiple ways that people cosplay. There are multiple reasons why they want to.
mm-hmm,
So knowing what that is and planning for that for the next time, it's
right.
probably just as important.
Yeah. And is this a situation where you could enlist a little bit of help?
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay with you? Is that okay with the competition you're in?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like sometimes you can get leather work outsourced or whatever. Like, hey, if this cosplay has a lot of leather and you know that's not your jam, is that a thing we can outsource?
Yeah, don't
Yeah.
set oneself up to fail in some
Mm-hmm.
ways. If once again success is defined by this particular outcome as
Yeah.
opposed to another.
Yeah. Because if success is defined by showing up and having a good time, it sounds like you're not having a very good time right now.
Right.
Uh, do we think that magically on the day you're going to show up and have a good time then? Or
Cool, cool, excellent. Well, thank you for that.
Hmm.
What is something that you are a fan of that you'd like to share that people don't normally expect?
Oh. Y- Uh, so, um, I'm a fan of the gym.
Hmm? Yeah.
I think that's the best example of something I'm a fan of that people wouldn't expect.
Mhm.
Um, I've been a yoga teacher since 2010, and I kind of burned myself out on yoga because I became a yoga teacher.
Ah,
And I'm very proud of the work that I did, and I created a lot of cool stuff, and I helped a lot of people. And it stopped having the inherent joy that it once had when I first got into it. When I would just show up and do yoga asana and feel like, oh, I feel so good, I'm so happy. And I have rediscovered that feeling
mm,
by moving my body with weightlifting.
mm,
And I'm big on embodiment, in case y'all didn't pick up on that. And I feel like I am very much in my body experiencing sensation
mhm.
um, by lifting weights. And I'm really into gym culture. I like calling people bro and doing fist bumps. And that's not acting for me.
Mhm.
Like that is an embodied experience.
Mhm.
That is true cosplay. Me in my prana workout gear at the gym.
Mhm.
Um and it's for joy. The purpose is joy.
Excellent, excellent. I think
Mhm.
a lot of things I love there. There was sort of the mindfulness element that you brought in. That
Mhm.
I'm sitting in this space and
Mhm.
acknowledging the sensations, right?
Mhm.
But there's also sort of going back to the beginning part when you talk about burning out on yoga.
Mhm.
Um, People talk a lot about sort of the truism that has been for most of motivation research, or
Mhm.
it's the idea that extrinsic outweighs intrinsic, but there are some contexts where they can coexist. They can sit
Mhm.
together. They can be competitive, certainly, but they can be complementary. And it
Mhm.
sounds like for you, you reached a point where any complementarity that existed
Mhm.
went away, and
Yeah,
it just became more about the extrinsic over the intrinsic.
it's completely.
Okay.
I can barely even enjoy a yoga class in general now.
Oh.
I have to either be very good friends with the teacher, like I went and took my friend's class when I was in LA. And that was lovely because she's a lovely human and I enjoy her. Um, but I do have a trainer.
Mm,
That's the privilege of my age and stuff. Um, and he often gets on me about like, why don't you take a yoga class? It'll help with your mobility. I'm like, nope,
mhm,
nope. I'm not taking a yoga class at the gym because I know how these folks were trained and I know how they're going to talk and they're going to be acting.
mm,
They're going to be acting like yoga teachers and it's going to drive me nuts.
mhm,
And my trainer has asked me, um, hey, I think you'd be a really good trainer. You've been doing this for a few years now, and you're always trying to motivate other people. And I'm like, I am happy to be a support system.
mhm,
I am happy to give those bumps and call people bro. I don't want to be a trainer because I don't want to happen to this what happened to that.
mhm. Taking that valuable self knowledge that you gained, uh, and moving it forward. Yeah, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for all of that. Let's start to sort of transition out here.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell folks a little bit about where they can find you online? What are the
Mm-hmm.
things that you do? Like I see a book over your shoulder.
Yeah, you
Tell me a little bit about
do.
that.
Yeah, you do. So I have a new book available for pre-sale called The Grieving Therapist: Caring for Yourself and Your Clients When It Feels Like the End of the World. I wrote this with my very best friend and writing partner, Larissa Agarski. And it's all about how hard it is to be a therapist and how people don't necessarily think about that. They come to therapy for support for themselves.
Mhm,
And sometimes therapists can really lose themselves by giving everything over to that work and not leaving anything for themselves.
Mhm.
And the purpose of the book is to help therapists feel seen and connected, and you're not alone. The book will officially be out July 25th, but it's available for pre-sale wherever you get books. And while you're adding to cart, we have another book called Starship Therapies, Using Therapeutic Fan Fiction to Rewrite Your Life.
Mhm.
And that book is for anybody, therapists or non-therapists alike. Um, Not that non-therapists wouldn't enjoy the grieving therapist, but it might not be quite as resonant.
Mhm.
Um, the purpose of the grieving therapist was to provide support for helping professionals.
Mhm.
Starship Therapies provide support for everybody.
Mhm.
So those are my works.
Mhm.
Uh, and you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Mind Body Fandom, because I take a holistic approach to healing mind, body, and fandom. And I really appreciate this conversation today, Eric. I believe that meaning comes through dialogue, and I feel like I created some new meaning today. So thanks for inviting
Excellent.
me to do that.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always great to chat with you informally, and I'm glad we could do
Mhm.
this. I'm always learning new things, and that's part of why I love being in these spaces with
Mm.
fellow nerds who all come at things from different life experiences. And
Mhm.
yes, new meaning. I love that.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Thank you, everyone out there
Mm.
for listening. Take care.